I'm going to do a little rambling before I get going here. I remember being young, 20s, 30s, and even to some degree 40s, and thinking that I knew it all. And I want to tell you, Mr. Tim Pool, for you guys, this idea that we don't know a tenth of what you do because we're, quote, boomers, let me just help you. That's not really a fair thing. And I'm going to say something to you that's going to kind of skewer you a little bit. And I don't mean to do that, but I'm going to anyway, because I have to say this thing. You're the one who consistently points out that the people on the right tend to be the ones who are more informed. Now let me point a couple of things out to you. Number one, more people on the right are older. That means they're more informed as a rule when, oh, that's right, they're older. That's point number one that I'll make to you. Point number two that I'll make to you is people like Bill Maher. Bill is, by anybody's acknowledgement, a liberal. And so, of course, he doesn't have a very good grasp on reality or a very good way to figure out how to get what he needs. And let me just tell you something. I can go to CNN and get news as well as I can anywhere else because I know that CNN is going to tell me stories, and I'll have to pick out the stuff that's garbage and take the stuff that's worth doing. Okay, I need to go ahead and get on with what I'm actually going to talk about today, which is party movement, right? And I'm going to talk about that on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and today is Wednesday, the 4th of May of 2022. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub, on my Facebook page, on Kurt's Religion and Politics.locals.com, on Minds, MINDS.com, on the Kurt's Religion and Politics group there, on on Parler, on Gab, on Twitter, wherever else you happen to be finding me today. Subject for today is going to actually be party movement. Now, what I kind of hit this already is old isn't dead, and I'm going to get into that some more tomorrow. But I'm going to talk today about this idea of left and right and movement of parties. And we're going to go ahead and go through my notes real quick to kind of solidify what I'm saying. Have the left and right in the United States truly moved further apart, or are people confused about that being the case? I would argue that they may have. Okay? But if so, it wasn't because the right moved further right. In fact, I would say, being honest, for the most part, the right has actually moved substantially to the left. There are notable exceptions to that, of course. That's what I'll discuss on this edition of the Daily Summation podcast. Here I go again. That's right, I'm getting old. I wasn't really around, if at all, when John Fitzgerald Kennedy was president. But might I say, most everything he said or did, with the exception of certain social issues, was to the right of the current crop of conservative leaders in the United States. For those unaware, Mr. Kennedy was not a Republican. To argue that the right in the United States has moved even further to the right would imply that many of them were anything like right-leaning to begin with. To be fair, there are those about whom such a statement could be made. But ask yourself this question. If you take the time to look at Kennedy, and many were as far right as he was in the Democrat Party in those days, how many Republican leaders in the modern day would find themselves on his left? I don't really feel the need to ask that, since in my experience, that would be true for most of the people in question. Even most of the ones on Mr. Kennedy's right are nowhere near the far right. It's true there are some folks out there not in leadership positions who would be even viewed as far right. But actually, I would guess, based again on my experience, the number is quite small. Most people on that conservative side of the aisle are probably closer to moderate than true rightist. Taking a look at the left, though, where they have pretty much always been progressives who were far out in the weeds, there always have been, right? It's startling how many folks now considered mainstream would make that same JFK appear to be a hardline rightist. Even the more moderate folks who consider themselves liberals, like Tim Pool, often still support crazy stuff like universal health care, something that didn't stand a ghost of a chance on the left just 2 or 3 decades ago. Don't believe me? Just ask Hillary Clinton and she'll tell you all about it. She tried all of this stuff they're pushing today back when Bill was the president. And to find somebody who actually qualifies as a centrist in the modern day is almost unheard of. To be fair, if somebody does claim that label, the left will label them all but borderline crazy right-leaning. That's how that's going to work out. You'll forgive me, but I haven't moved hardly at all in the last 20 years. I'm not saying there haven't been motions here and there. There have. I've come to some conclusions and changed in some ways, but not a lot. Those on the left have been rapidly moving ever further in that leftward direction. Those on the right, at least many of them, have been moving to the left in an apparent attempt to placate and ingratiate themselves to the folks who live there, that is, on the left. By the way, considering the folks on the left are moving ever onward in that direction, it will pretty much always be a horrible failure to do so. I've said this before and I say it now again. Forgive me, but if you think both sides are moving away from each other in rapid fashion, you need to know people like me are in the rear view mirror of the left sports car as it careens leftward over the cliff. Most, or many, supposedly of my ilk, I would say most, that's probably a fair thing, are moving with them, although typically at a slower pace. Please, stop telling me the right is moving ever rightward. Nothing could be further from the truth for most of them. Likewise, do not try to say the folks on the left, for the most part, are even attempting, even beginning to attempt, in fact, to moderate either. Neither is factually correct in my view. Okay, I am done with my notes, so let me go on with what I'm trying to say. I think, again, here we are at that mic drop moment. Here we are. So the reality is, by the way, you may hear my son in the background. Please forgive him if you do. The reality is the folks on the left are continuing to move ever leftward. And I'm just going to tell you something. I don't really think that's exactly true. I think what they're doing is expressing themselves more leftward than they did before because they see themselves being accepted into the mainstream for ever more insane leftist ideas. So they're acting more leftist. And I have to tell you, for the large part, many of them, I think what they're doing is following rules for radicals and attempting to knock the United States down so that they can move the power structures into socialist directions, or really, more correctly, totalitarian ones. Those on the right, many of them are being pulled towards the left, and they're allowing themselves to go there, and they're not stopping it. And I'm here to tell you, I'm not interested. Does that make me look like I'm moving to the right? Well, it depends on your vantage point. From my vantage point, I'm not moving any further to the right, really. I'm not becoming a hardline rightist or anything like that. The reality is I've been where I am for a very long time. On the other hand, if you look at the distance between the right and the left, yes, for a lot of us, it is growing. For some, it's staying about the same, and the right is moving left with the left. Okay, and sometimes it's even decreasing, but for the most part, it's at best staying the same. For people like me, it's the gap is widening, but the reason the gap is widening is I'm standing still and they're moving left. If you want to sit here and say that those of us who are on the right are all moving rightward, you are confused. I'm going to say this again. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was considered a liberal, was considered a left-leaning individual, was considered progressive, and yet today, if you look at JFK, many of the things that he did and said, they're not accepted by the left at all. Look, they're looking at Martin Luther King Jr. and saying, no, we can't work like Martin Luther King Jr. said we need to move because what he was saying was we need to become stronger, and we need to push for other people to accept us as who we are. What they're saying is what you need to combat racism is more racism. That's what they're doing. So this idea that, again, that the left is staying the same or not moving further to the left is crazy. But at the same time, the idea that the right largely is moving further to the right is equally insane. Look at the right. You yourself see it. They will do nothing if they're put in positions of authority. And I don't really know why, because if they did, they would find that there would be a lot of people who supported them. And I'm not talking about crazy, radical, right-leaning things. I'm talking about doing things that were actually reasonable, responsible, proper things for them to do. This is my perspective on all of this. Okay, so if you're wondering, no, if we're moving farther apart, it is not because the right is moving to the right and the left to the left. It's because the left is moving to the left, and they're moving there faster than the right is moving to the left. Now, again, there are those of us that are not in that boat. We're not moving to the left. We're staying still. That would be people like me. Okay. This has been the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Today is Wednesday, the 4th of May of 2022. That would be the middle of that weekday for most folks. Tomorrow then will be Thursday, the 5th of May of 2022. And of course, we'll be moving ever closer to the weekend. I've got things I need to do this weekend, so hopefully that will work out well. Thank you for everyone who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub, on my Facebook page. That would be Kurt's Religion and Politics on Facebook, the Kurt's Religion and Politics page. On Locals, that would be Kurt's Religion and Politics.locals.com. On Minds, MINDS.com, primarily on the Kurt's Religion and Politics group there. On Parler, on Gab, on Twitter, or wherever else you happen to be seeing or hearing me today. I'm slurring my words today, not really sure why. Subject for today has been party movement, and that's a question. And the subject for tomorrow is going to be what I started this video talking about a little bit, this podcast talking about a little bit, and that would be old isn't dead. I want to kind of get into that tomorrow because I really want for people to understand some things that I don't think certain folks, particularly younger folks, are getting at this point in time. Hope you're having a good day today. Hope everything is going well for you, and hopefully we will see you again on tomorrow's, that would be Thursday, the 5th of May's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This podcast was created on Wednesday, the 4th of May of 2022. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching today's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. Don't forget to come back tomorrow to check out the next one. Remember, on various platforms, primarily Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, and CloudHub, and the audio podcast, you can subscribe to my content. For the audio podcast, you probably want to use Apple, Google, or Spotify. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. In order to find me on those platforms, you can go to the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, and CloudHub. You can also get to my content on Facebook by finding the Kurt's Religion and Politics page there. Minds, MINDS.com, where you will find me at the Kurt's Religion and Politics group. And Kurt's Religion and Politics.locals.com as well. You can look there. I post my daily video on various social media sites, really only about 3, Parler, Gab, and Twitter at present. I am at KP Schubert on each of them, and you can find me under them, and you can find the videos under me. You should be able to find my podcasts on Google and Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's also on podcasts.kpschubert.com. That's podcasts with an S. .kpschubert.com. If you're looking for me on various of the podcast sites, you probably want to search Kurt's Religion and Politics, not the Daily Summation. Keep in mind you can subscribe to my content on various places that I put it. All constructive feedback is welcome. You can like, dislike, add a rumble, or give whatever feedback is available on any of the platforms that you can do such things. You can also add a comment on what I put there. Unless you're advertising or doing something that I believe will harm others, I'll leave your comments out there even if I don't agree with or understand them. I will try to let you No, I've seen them when possible and may reply if I feel it's reasonable, appropriate, and possible, of course. Thanks again for viewing this edition of the Daily Summation from Chris Rosen Politics. Don't forget to come back again for tomorrow's as well.